While playing Truth or Dare with friends, I revealed that I kissed someone in our relationship then. I've regretted the path my life has taken ever since I let it slip in front of my boyfriend of 5 years that I kissed someone else while we were together. It's been a bumpy ride of losing the man I love and wanted to spend my whole life with and losing my friends. Basically, this whole ordeal had altered the way my life was supposed to go. When I say my whole life was turned upside down, I mean it in a way I had never expected. It had just been a random get-together with friends and one too many drinks, and the next day my boyfriend was altering my life in well-thought-out and cruel, twisted revenge that I never saw coming. I revealed that I kissed someone in our relationship, then my boyfriend married me. Funny, unbelievable, and twisted, right? You guys are about to get shocked. My name is Penny and I'm 25 years old. Penny is obviously not my real name. It's a name I always thought would fit me. So while I let you guys into my life, I'm going to be Penny. My boyfriend's name is going to be Mark. Not a real name either, but I'm sure you all have gotten the gist. Mark is 27 years old and we had been dating for 5 years. I had met Mark in high school and we had decided to start dating after high school since we were going to the same college together. Mark was the perfect boyfriend anybody could ever wish for, but I had gotten too carried away one random night 3 years into our relationship and had cheated on my boyfriend. I won't pass it off as some kiss because I'm someone who believes in loyalty to the very end, and I always take responsibility for what I have done. I just didn't tell him at that time because I regretted it and didn't want anything that was going to ruin my relationship with him. My mom had just died, and it was the whole thing accompanied with the grief that had made me kiss a stranger at a club when I had a boyfriend. And I couldn't tell said boyfriend Mark that I had kissed a guy. If I did that, he was going to leave me and I didn't have any other person to turn to, so I had kept my mouth shut. 2 years after my mistake, Mark and I were seated amongst a group of friends, and under the influence of drinks and a game of Truth and Dare, I had let loose my little secret. This had just been an innocent get-together with friends that I had been excited for. It was our first time together as friends after graduating college 2 years ago. And truth be told, I hadn't even wanted to go. If only I had trusted my gut instincts and stayed home with Mark, my life wouldn't be as it is. Anyway, after too many drinks, one of our friends suggested we play a Truth or Dare game, and we all got invested. We were all laughing and having fun, but I was already drunk off my head when my friend asked me Truth or Dare. And then when I replied with Truth, my friend asked me to confess a secret that no one at our table knew, even my boyfriend. Heck, I would have said anything. There had been so many things I would have said now that I think about it. But I had gone ahead and opened my mouth and said I had kissed someone else in my relationship with my boyfriend right there. You all needed to witness how livid my boyfriend was at that moment. He stood up and left, and I honestly didn't blame him. I didn't even realize what I had done until the next day. That night I had slept at my friend's place because I couldn't take myself home, and my boyfriend had stormed out of our gathering. It was the next day that I realized the full repercussions of what I had done. I got to my boyfriend's place and I was ready to fully face his wrath. But I got there and my boyfriend had just smiled and asked me where I had been. He didn't take any revenge or start shouting at me to explain to him how I had cheated on him. Mark had just been calm, but I should have known that he was plotting something. I had dated him for 5 years, and my boyfriend believed in slow and steady revenge. I just hadn't thought he would carry it out on me. Now that I think about it, I remember how he had gotten his brother back 5 years after his brother had done something wrong to him. It was so unbelievable. But that was my boyfriend. I should have thought of that. I should have known. But I just wanted to do everything in my power to make Mark forgive me. Anyway, I had gotten home and Mark hadn't shouted or raised his voice at me. He had said he had a surprise for me and we were going to go out by evening. I had been shocked and had agreed, afraid that he was definitely going to have his revenge on me at dinner, and we would put it past us. We got to dinner that night and had a wonderful time, and when I was with my heart beating in my chest from fear, Mark slid down on his knees and asked me to marry him. I was excited, of course. I didn't know my life was about to get miserable because I had kissed someone else outside of my relationship. All because of a kiss, and I loved my boyfriend and couldn't say no to him. This was the start of my misery. I got married to my boyfriend of 5 years because I didn't know what to do and locked myself in eternal misery. Mark's plan for revenge was so perfect. We got married in a small ceremony that Mark had planned, and all our friends were shocked that my boyfriend hadn't done away with me and had decided to marry me. The night of my marriage, my husband brought in another woman to the house. I mean it, and he kissed her right in front of me. On the night that was meant to be special, I hadn't let it get to me because I had thought that was him having his revenge on me. But that was just the beginning. But did I learn my lesson? My story is about to take a weird turn, so sit tight. I became miserable. Mark brought in different women daily to make me jealous, but I never knew what he did with them. He never did anything with them except the one woman he had kissed on our wedding night. He just brought the girls into the house and left them to do whatever they wanted Jane or the house till the next morning when they would leave. I felt so ashamed and terrible by the whole thing. Why had I married him then? Why didn't I leave the marriage, you might ask? I had tried to leave. One day when I was fed up with the various women that he would kiss in front of me and had barged into his office and asked him for a divorce. I had asked him for a divorce and demanded that he let me go, that he had gotten his revenge and made me regret ever kissing a guy and not telling him. Mark had just laughed and told me that I just needed to be in the marriage for 2 years to prove to him that I truly loved him. Then he would forgive me. He promised me all the bringing of girls would stop. It did stop, as he said, but there was a rift between my husband and I. The man I had known for over 5 years plus wasn't the man I had married. It was like he didn't care for me, and I know it had all been my fault that I had brought it upon myself by cheating in my relationship. But this wasn't what I had signed up for. I hadn't known the man I had gotten married to. It was like he couldn't bother to acknowledge my existence whenever we were together, and when we were around our friends, it was all they gossip about but behind our back. I knew this because I had witnessed firsthand. We had gone for one of our friends' birthday dinner party at a restaurant, and although Mark and I had arrived together, he acted like we were strangers the entire night. I had been so embarrassed. Whenever I had tried to join the conversation with our friends, he cut me down immediately and made it in such a way that I looked stupid in front of all of them. I had been saying something about how putting together birthday dinners could be so easy, so long as you have a theme you wanted to work with. I had then gone on to list various themes, and Mark deemed it fit to cut me off when I said nautical. I hadn't pronounced the word right, and he had just called me out in front of everyone. After the dinner, I had excused myself to go to the restroom to wash off my hands and talk myself out of crying. I had locked myself in one of the stalls and was about to get out when 2 people walked in, turned out to be my friends, and they had laughed at the awkward experience between myself and Mark. These babes that were supposed to be my friends had gone off in the bathroom not knowing I had been in one of the stalls listening to them. Apparently, they couldn't wait for me to get drunk again so I can spill more secrets. They were also wondering what I held against my husband for him to want to marry me after I had cheated on him. These had been all they had said, and some I couldn't remember but were just as awful and bad. When I had come out of the stall, I had excused myself from the dinner to go home. When I had gotten home, I had cried my eyes out. I know you all on this space will probably think I deserved it, but hadn't I paid for it? This was not the only occasion. Sometimes I wondered how I had been able to put off with the loveless marriage. That also made me to make the next stupid decision. Mark had given me a condition that I had to prove to him I loved him by staying in a marriage for 2 years. To stay in a loveless marriage while my husband openly flirted with other women, but I had been forced to sit back and watch him because I had made a mistake 3 years into our relationship and was reaping the consequences now. And also because I loved him and had no one else to turn to. Think what you might against me after this, but remember the big holy book said judge, not lest ye be judged. I had gone 1 year in my marriage to Mark without demanding for a divorce and telling him I was done trying to prove to him I was faithful and truly loved him. If you were in my shoes, do you think you would have endured? I know you all would hate me for my next decision, the part I'm about to tell you, but think about the question I had asked previously. Should I have left him when he had told me to prove my love? You all already know the reason why I could not. It may sound stupid to you, but it was my life. And I had held out hope that after the 2 years, Mark was going to change his mind and then love me like I had dreamed. Oh, Mao. Wrong mistake. My life was falling in succession like a deck of cards just from one single mistake that had set of the fireworks. I was grieving, and the guy I had kissed had happened to be there when Mark wasn't. So I had kissed him, but we realized ourselves before it had gone too far. My second mistake had been not telling Mark at the time it had happened, and my life spiraled down. Anyway, 1 year and 6 months into the marriage, Mark stopped dropping off regular payments for groceries and provisions we needed in the house. When I had asked him about it, he would rattle on about how I never provided anything after cheating on him. He always repeated this when he was in a bad mood. He would say this before dropping off the regular allowance for the house, but this time he has halved it. I didn't know this was all part of Mark's plan for revenge, and I fell right into his trap. Money that was supposed to be for 2 weeks' worth of items, Mark had halved it and wouldn't give me any more until the 2 weeks were over, and we were well into the following week, and I had begged him for more. I hated begging. It hurt my pride and ego. But when push came to shove, Elle had to do it. I begged Mark once or twice for the household allowance money, and I got fed up. I just couldn't wrap my head around it because my husband made more than enough for an average family, and we weren't even an average family, so why wasn't he bringing out the money? I was puzzled and didn't know what to do, and this was how I fell into Mark's trap. He set me up to prove my loyalty to him, and I failed. How? Walk with me. Trust me when I found out that everything that had happened so far in my life from the day I got married to Mark till we divorced was all planned out by him. I was shocked, livid, and mad at myself, of course. You guys can feel free to hate on me. I failed my husband's test of loyalty. With Mark not dropping the allocated money for house upkeep, I had to cut down on my spending for the house. Whenever I went to the grocery store, I would always put back some things because it was more than the budget I had prepared. The cashier at the local grocery I frequented had even marked my face, and whenever I rushed back to drop back an item, she would snicker at me. Could you imagine that kind of embarrassment? I was over it, and at the calculated, I ran into my husband's pawn in the game that was called destroying my life. However, I didn't know it was my husband's pawn as at the time. I met Luke, fake name Av, at the local grocery store I frequented. I had been missing a cent at the counter and was frantically searching my purse for it when Luke walked up to the cashier and handed in $1 and told her to keep the change. I was a woman who had been sex-starved for a year and 6 months, so when a fine man walked up to me and solved a distress, I looked at him like a god. Luke was easygoing on the eyes and he had a massive build and a nice smile. Luke was also my husband's pawn and secret best friend that I didn't know anything about as at the time I met him. After paying for me, he had offered to walk me to my car and made true on his words when I had said yes. He took my bags from me and I was reminded of all the times Mark had done the same for me, and I had taken it for granted and missed them. I thanked Luke thinking I would never see him again. Wrong again. The next day I saw Luke at a coffee shop where I had gone to have a late brunch with a friend who had stood me up, by the way. Luke just happened to be at that same coffee shop waiting for his business partner who had also stood him up that day, and we then had a late brunch at the coffee shop together. Now that I think about it, I had told Mark where I was going to be that day, and he had related it to Luke, so our meeting was going to happen. What were the damn odds that the guy just happened to be in the same coffee shop as I was at in this huge-ass city if it wasn't planned? Why hadn't I had my wits about me to think of that? Back to my story, so I hit it off with Luke and we talked about everything under the sun on that day, and I discovered we had similar interests, or it had all been a ruse by my husband. His likes and dislikes had been too similar to mine, and I hadn't even thought that he had been handed a file about me to read so he could befriend me and make me get close to him. I had been so very naive and stupid and gullible. I was desperately seeking the love Mark and I once shared, and since he wasn't giving it to me, I had allowed Luke into my life. Yeah, like I said, I was stupid. Luke and I became close, almost inseparable. Luckily, Mark never cared about my goings and comings and never bothered to ask. I mean, why would he have bothered when he had a plant that knew my whereabouts? Luke reported back everything to him, and I had just been a fool desperate for love and attention. Anyway, I went out with Luke. He took me out, showered me with attention, gave me everything I wanted, took me shopping. Basically, all the things I was missing being married to my husband and proving my loyalty to him. Luke made up for it, except in the sex department. I already knew what I was doing was wrong, hanging out with another guy when I had a husband. This was what had led to me making my first mistake that had landed me in a loveless marriage, and here I was repeating the same thing again. But Luke took care of everything. He took care of everything to the point that I started forgetting that I had a husband at home that I had to go home to. Another thing that should have alerted me to Luke acting strange was that whenever it was late or already turning dark outside, he would start asking if I wasn't ready to go home, and it had just been weird now that I'm thinking about it. But then I had shrugged it off as nothing. It was when I got home that I realized that I had married Mark and wanted to prove that I was loyal to him. I even stopped seeing Luke for a while. Or I tried to stop seeing Luke, but it was like he was everywhere and never ready to make me have a good time. I tried really, but I was missing out on a good friendship and had sworn to myself that I was only going to be friends with Luke, and it wouldn't pass that. It passed that, and I was caught and embarrassed even more. The night I had finally decided to move out of the friend zone with Luke, I had told him that I was going to meet him at his place, and when I got there dressed all sexy and everything, my husband barged in and caught us as I was trying to throw myself at Luke. I was horrified to say the least, and I hadn't expected it in any way. My husband had just smiled and walked away, and there I was chasing after him. He had given me a second chance, and I had messed it up. I followed Mark in my car, and when I got home, my luggages was already being thrown out the door. I ran up to him and tried to tell him that nothing happened, and he flung pictures of Luke and I walking down the street together, and all my husband was saying was that he had asked me for 2 years, and I couldn't even prove that I truly loved him. Mark threw me out of the house that night, and I had to go sleep at a friend's place after a series of begging. The next day, I was called by his lawyer to his office that Mark wanted to see me, and I thought that it was going to be divorce papers for sure. I got to the lawyer's office, and then there was Mark, and he told me how it had all been part of a test to see if I hadn't meant to cheat that day. Apparently, Mark lived by the adage, a leopard could never change its spots, and I was the leopard in this situation, and my husband wanted to see if I could truly change. He had wanted to marry me so he could get his hands on his inheritance, and then he had found out that I had kissed another guy, so he had thought of how to get his inheritance and still take revenge on me in the process. Mark then revealed that he had planned out everything with Luke, and I was still the same. To say I was devastated was an understatement, but I was also mad. That was when everything came together in my head, and I realized Mark had just used me and gotten revenge on just a simple kiss. I was mad. I was raving mad because how dare he? I told him my mind, and then I left the office. I signed the divorce papers quite all right, but I told him he was going to see me in court. Do you guys think I deserved the kind of revenge my husband pulled on me? Update. Hi, Redditors. I'm back with an update from the last time I told you all my life experience on this platform. I have read all the comments, and I just wasn't to say that I don't actually give 2 cents what you all think about my life. Well, I took Mark to court because I deserved to have my own revenge, but it backfired. Yes, it backfired in the sense that Mark and I's marriage was a sham. It was a fake lawyer that had processed our marriage certificate, and the whole event had been a sham set up by Mark so he could get his inheritance and make my life miserable without having to get married to me. I had taken him to court based on the fact that I didn't sign a prenup, and after all he had put me through, I deserved a piece of the inheritance, but I ended up paying the fine for wasting the court's time on a sham marriage. I had used my savings for that and to pay the lawyer that I had hired because Mark didn't spend 1 dime on me while we had been married. I'm glad it's all over though, but I've been scarred for life, and none of my friends are talking to me because Mark's the better person and I'm just a nobody. I'm trying to pick up the pieces of what's left of my life, and one thing I'm going to drop with you all is that you should always tell the truth at the right time, and don't keep secrets from your significant others.